Okay, so we're going to start our relief carved slab by rolling out a slab of clay. We're going to roll out the slab of clay first and then do the drawing, because oftentimes if you get the clay right from the bag, it's going to be pretty wet, and really wet clay is kind of hard to carve. We want it to dry out a little bit. So we'll roll it out first. We'll let it sit on the table, and then we can draw for the next 20 minutes, half an hour, however long it takes for you to work your designs out. And by that time, it'll be a little bit more firmed up. Okay, more on that later. So anyways, I've got a piece of clay here, and it's kind of big. So if you were doing kind of a big cup, it might be this much clay, if you were to hand form that. So this is even a little bit bigger than that. So let's say 2 smaller cups or 2 medium-sized cups worth of clay. That is. Okay, so I've got that, and what I want to do is I want to make the clay about the size of half of a sheet of paper. So here's a sheet of paper, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to fold it in half, and I'm going to use this as my guide. And that's how big I want my slab to be. Okay, just like so. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to roll my slab a little bit longer so it can be as wide as my paper. So I've got that, and there we go. Is that about right? Yeah, that's plenty wide enough. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is turn it the other way and start rolling it long. And I'm going to start using these guys. What we want is we want it to be just as thick as these. Those are a ½ inch, and that will be just the right amount to be able to be strong enough to hold its shape and to work out well, but deep enough, thick enough, so that you could do some really nice carving into it. Very easy carving into it. Okay, so we got that, and we'll just roll. And you can see that every time that I'm rolling it, I'm pushing it in and flipping it over. Pushing it in, flipping it over. And you can see here where the table is starting to absorb the moisture out of the clay. Okay. So I've got that, and just keep rolling it. Maybe check it against my paper. Oh yeah, everything's going to fit just perfectly. Okay, so that seems pretty good. It's nice and flat. And so then I'm going to take my paper, I'm going to use it as a guide, and I'm going to cut it. So here I've got my paper right here. Use one of these guys, just line it up on the paper, and I'm going to cut it with my butter knife. Now you're going to be using carving tools here pretty soon. Never cut with a carving tool because you're going to hurt the tables. And we want to have nice tables to work on. Remember, back of the butter knife, not the bladed part. Okay, so also note whenever I'm cutting a slab, I might use just a little bit of water to lubricate it to make things cut faster, better, smoother, right? But also I'm not going to necessarily just cut through with one time. I could, I'm strong enough to do that, but it's better practice to cut a little bit, cut from the other end, cut from the other end, cut from the other end, because otherwise what's going to happen is it's going to pull the clay and it's going to distort your slab. And so, with this project, we're learning a little bit about relief carving before we do a much bigger project on relief carving. But we're also learning a little bit about cutting and working with slabs so that when we do other projects as well, because slabs can become very intricate, that we learn a little bit how to shape them and make them really nice and square, like that. Okay, you can see here too how much water the clay has given to the table, how much the table has absorbed. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just put this slab aside now, and every so often, it's right above the camera here, every so often I might give it a little turn so that it can keep absorbing. Now you want to be very gentle with your hands, because every time that you move it, you see you take a chance of distorting this, especially while this is very wet. Okay, so now to the drawings. The things with the drawing is that we'll also use sort of half a sheet of paper like this, and very important, to draw a border. We want to have a border around the clay. If you don't know how wide to draw your border, maybe take it about the width of a pencil or so, or the width of your little finger, or if you can estimate it, about a ½ inch, like maybe one of these guys right here, right? You could use one of these, for instance. Just taking it something like this. Let's see, can we see it here? Like this, for instance, and drawing along that edge. That would give us a good guide. But in any case, we want a border. The reason why we want a border is because it's going to give our slab strength and give us a boundary. And if you're lazy like me, it's just that much less to carve. Okay, so I've got a couple of ideas started here. I've got either this graphic of the Spartan head that's, very sort of straight lines and, very set here, or I have this rose, which is going to be a little bit more ambiguous, right? So in either case, we want at least three layers, okay, to start our carvings with. In the future, or as you become better, it's really not about the number of layers, because you'll be putting in as many layers as you need, or layers can be kind of ambiguous, one layer blending into another as you become better. But to make sure that you're up to, well, a certain level, then we want to do 3 layers. Okay, so what do I mean? I mean like this, for instance. This first area down here, this would be the deepest, so we can call that 1. And then right here, this would be another layer that would be sort of in between. So let's say, for instance, if we had this layer in white and this layer in red, and then this layer could be blue, and they'll be at different heights, one height to another. So here's 1, and we'll call this 2, and we'll call that 3. So that's 3 layers. This layer here would probably be 3, could be 2, but we'll call it 3. Okay, so you see this part here I don't have to end up actually carving. This part here I don't have to actually end up carving because they're both on my surface. Alright, so what about something like this? Well, what I would do is I'd say like, okay, here's my little drawing of a rose. And as I look at it, where do I have my layers here? Well, here could be 1 layer right here. Okay, and then under the next layer of height would be 2. The next layer of height would be 3. Actually, I have 4 layers in this one. Okay, one after another after another. And in fact, you could get many, many layers in something like this. But I'll show you in a little bit how you can kind of cheat with that a little bit. So what do I mean by that? I mean, like for instance, if we were to look at this from the side, you'd say like, okay, here is 1 layer, right? Then, but here was, let's say, another layer. And here is yet another layer, and here is yet another layer. You see, they're really actually at about the same height here, but one just going down into the other one will give you the illusion of depth. You'll see as we go along. Okay. In any case, I've got these drawn. I'm working with this, working it out. And as I'm working it out, here's one trick, is let's say you get something and it's all messy because you've been working out all your ideas on it. What you could do is you could really darken up the outsides of it, and then you could go ahead and with another piece of paper, you should probably be able to see through and trace it. So here, for instance, I can see my Spartan head. And now I have a drawing that's all clean. Okay. You say like, okay, Mr. Kuhn, but let's say I have writing that I want to do on mine. And by the way, if you do writing, keep it very blocky, because remember, we're carving. We're not engraving. If you were just to engrave, let's say, with a pencil or with one of the carving tools, just draw the lines, that would really just be engraving. But that's not what we're doing. We're carving. So make the letters blocky so that we can carve our stuff away. Remember, here would be 1, here would be 2, here would be 3. Okay, well, what you do is after I've darkened this up like this, I could just turn the paper over and just like before when I was tracing, I can see the lines through, especially since I've drawn nice and dark, and I can redraw those lines. And so for instance, I'll get the mirror image of the SHS, just like so. So using a wooden pencil, not one of the mechanical pencils, don't hardly bring those things to class. Those might be fine for writing, but they're really not that great for many art things. Okay, unless you're going to tear them apart and just use them for their parts. But a wooden pencil has a lead that's different. It's a little bit softer than what's in those pencils. In any case, so there we go. I've got this. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to continue to draw around and redraw all my lines and everything. And then I'm going to transfer this onto the clay. So that's why I want to use this pencil here. And if you have a trouble with transferring it, then I do have pencils that are even softer than a good old number 2 HB, and we can try that out and see if that works for you. But the trick is really to make it nice and dark. Really get those lines in strong. That's what's going to make for a good transfer. Okay, so I've got my slab. It's had a little bit of a chance to dry out a little bit, but not too much. And if you, let's say, put your slab in a bag overnight, and it became a little bit firmer than what you'd like it to be, you could just gently moisten just the surface, because you do want it a little bit moist on the surface in order to take the transfer. Not wet, moist. You see no standing water here, okay? But the clay surface is not totally dry either. Okay, so I've got my SHS right here, and everything is kind of backwards, and that's good. And so I've made it really dark. So let's see if I can't transfer that on. So I'm going to lay it down on here just the way that I want it. Okay, smooth it down real good so I've got good surface connection there. And then I'm just going to go over these lines with the wooden part of my pencil right here. Okay, let's see if that's starting to transfer. Oh, some of it is. Some of it's not as doing as good as I'd like. Let's rub that a little bit more. Okay, I've really rubbed this pretty thoroughly with the wooden part of my pencil here. So let's see if it's transferring. Yeah, some more, some less. What I can do if I'm really worried about it is I could go ahead and make a little bit of a crease. So I'm using the tip now to just draw, and that's engraving the clay a little bit, because remember, it's just really about transferring that image. I mean, heck, in the end, you could just draw it outright onto the clay, but that might be a little sketchy, so I think you'd be better off to go ahead and do it on a piece of paper first. And when you check it, don't take it off all the way so that you could lay it back down. In any case, that looks like it has transferred pretty good. Some of the paper has come off because my clay was a little bit wet. Remember how I said you might moisten the surface of it? if it had gotten like really dry. If it was really wet, like this is a slab that I rolled out just not too long ago, that's still really wet. I wouldn't wet that at all. And I think this is going to be a really nice one for transfer. In fact, maybe I'll use that for my other one. But in any case, this one's transferring pretty nice. I can see that Spartan really pretty well. There's the Spartan head, everything. So I'll be able to start carving that pretty soon. But first, let me put this aside. And so here's the one that I rolled out just a few moments ago. And I don't know if you could see it, but it's very wet here, and it's been very wet here where it's been absorbing it. And the clay already does feel just a little bit firmer, just a little bit easier to work with, not distorting its shape so much. And here's my rose. Now on the Spartan, I redrew it on the inside because I wanted that SHS to go the right direction. Of course, I could have just drawn it backwards in the first place, but with this one it doesn't really matter which direction the rose goes, so I'm just going to go ahead and lay it down just as it is. Just like so. And let's see how this one transfers. The other thing too is if it really has a trouble, I do have some softer pencils that might work out very well for you. So let's see. Is that transferring? A little bit light. It's a little bit light, a little bit hard to see here. So I might go ahead and, let's see here. This is a case where I might go ahead and use a different pencil. Okay, my rose wasn't transferring as nice as I'd like it to, but that's okay. It gives me an opportunity to show you. So if your transferring isn't working, and remember it did work okay with my Spartan, in fact it worked pretty good, but this time it wasn't. You know, you just never know. So what I'm going to do is I've got a charcoal pencil here. Now please, if you borrow a charcoal pencil, let me sharpen it because they break really easy. And the trick is just really not sharpening it all the way, but you know, kids. So I would rather do it because they do get expensive, and I can just see kids, they just grind until the pencil is basically, well, nothing. Okay, but I've got my original drawing of the rose right here, and so that's no big deal to copy that. And so I'm going to go ahead and just trace over, and since I'm tracing, it won't take me very long at all to get a drawing. Okay, so now I've redrawn this with the charcoal pencil, and I'm going to go ahead and try and transfer that. So I'm taking out my original drawing, and going to go back to the other pencil because I only want to use this for the drawing. These pencils are much more expensive, but they're also much more fragile. So I'm going to put this one aside for right now, lay this down onto the slab, press it down good, and let's see if that transfers any better. Okay, this transfer seems to be much better than the first attempt, and so that's worked out pretty well. That's good. So now that I've got my drawings drawn, my slabs laid out, and the drawing transfer, I'm going to go ahead and start carving.